I'm thinking, you're not going to be free to do anything in the future. I've had my freedom. My dad fought in the war to have my freedom. And yours, he was hoping. But it looks like this one person is trying to take over. He's trying to tell us what we can and can't do, and it's not on.
This is Callum Smiles for Rebel News here in rainy central London to bring you a report on the soon-to-be expanded Ultra Low Emission Zone, otherwise known as the ULEZ. So what is the ULEZ? Well, the ULEZ is essentially an additional charge for motorists whose vehicles don't meet a certain emissions criteria. So when these so-called high-polluting vehicles drive into these charging zones, they have to pay £12.50 per day or receive a £180 fine in the post. And for our international audience, here is a brief history of the ULEZ here in London. Back in February 2003, the London congestion charge came into force. What the congestion charge is essentially the central part of London, initially 22 square kilometres, was designated a chargeable travel zone, and all drivers had to pay £8 to drive within the zone from 7 AM to 6 PM. The idea was to reduce the volume of moving vehicles and to help ease London's congestion problems. The congestion charge then doubled in size in February 2007. Fast forward to 2014, and Boris Johnson, at the time the Mayor of London, was said to be toying with the idea for implementing an ultra low emission zone. This would be another charged driving zone in London. By October 2017, Sadiq Khan was Mayor of London and brought in what he called the toxicity charge, or the T charge. This was, as some would argue, a knee-jerk reaction policy following London apparently suffering record air pollution levels in January 2017. The T charge was a charge levied on vehicles within central London on top of the already in place £11.50 congestion charge. The T charge was then officially replaced again under Sadiq Khan's mayorship on the 9th of April 2019 with the implementation of the Ultra Low Emission Zone. Initially, the Ultra Low Emission Zone, otherwise known as the ULEZ, covered the same area as the congestion charge but applied 24/7, 365 days a year, with charges of £12.50 for cars, vans and motorcycles and £100 a day for lorries, buses and coaches. So who actually pays the ULEZ charge? Well, generally speaking, it's older diesel and petrol cars because they don't meet the new low emission targets. It's essentially an additional daily cost for people with older vehicles, which is why many have labelled the ULEZ a tax on the less well-off in society. Almost 2 years after the creation of the ULEZ, in October 2021, Sadiq Khan rolled out the first ULEZ expansion. This took the charge up to, but not including, the north and south circular roads. Now Sadiq Khan is back and demanding a further ULEZ expansion, and this time the expanding zone will reach out to all the London boroughs from the 29th of August 2023. And for our international audience, and for those who are unfamiliar with Sadiq Khan, he's often been likened to that of a dictator because he often ignores legitimate opposition to his green woke policies. A common complaint here in London is that in the last mayoral election, which he narrowly won, he never mentioned expanding the ULEZ once. However, since winning the election, he's pushed forward doing whatever he pleases. The common stated intention for this is for public health and cleaner air, as stated in the recent Transport for London video.
London has an urgent air quality problem, and it's impacting the health of Londoners. So, to help clear the city's air, the Ultra Low Emission Zone is expanding across all London boroughs from the 29th of August this year. If you drive a petrol vehicle over 16 years old, or a diesel over 6 in these areas, check your vehicle now, because every journey matters.
Some may say the air quality in London could do with improving. But the question many are asking is, if there's any questionable evidence showing any markable benefits to the ULEZ expansion, why push ahead with something that's going to affect the lives of millions in London? So I've come here to Croydon in South London to speak to a concerned father about why he opposes the ULEZ expansion. Hi Kingsley, how you doing?
How you doing, you right?
Hi Teddy.
Teddy, come here, darling. Where are you off to? You coming to see who's coming at the door? Who'll come in? Hey.
So, Kingsley,
Yeah.
you're a father, a concerned father, with a child who's actually got breathing issues.
Yeah, he's got pieces.
Many people would say, you know, why would you oppose clean air? You don't oppose clean air. You've just got concerns regarding the ULEZ expansion. What are they?
Well, on the question about clean air, I believe actually the ULEZ is making the air worse and not better. Certainly, there are many flaws with the ULEZ. For example, there are thousands of motorcycles that are excluded from using central London areas because of the ULEZ. How can a cleaner motorcycle be non-compliant, whereas a more polluting car is compliant simply because of a few technicalities? And I think when you expose these, you realise actually there's lots of flaws, not just motorcycles. There's smaller engine cars that are non-compliant because of their age, that pollute a lot less than much bigger cars that are newer. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out that the smaller car is polluting a lot less than a bigger car. So in that sense, it's making it obvious that the ULEZ is actually making more pollution, not less. And when you go to the South Circular Road, this is just one example, the South Circular Road is absolutely gridlocked. And it's gridlocked because people are avoiding the Ultra Low Emission Zone, this so-called Ultra Low Emission Zone, let's get it right. Had they been allowed to just drive from A to B, they wouldn't be all bunched up in the South Circular Road. Now, because they're bunched up in the South Circular Road, they're all, a lot of them with their engines running, polluting more and polluting more and polluting more and polluting more. Had they been allowed to just go straight from A to B, that wouldn't be the case. And the argument that, well, you've taken these cars off the road it's a fallacy, because people don't take the cars off the road, they sell them. They'll sell them to someone else who's going to drive in a more rural area. And because it's a more rural area, they'll drive further. And if they're driving further, they're polluting more. And guess what? The wind blows into central London. So I'm not against clean air at all, I'm against nonsense, and this ULEZ is just nonsense.
And many people are concerned about how this is actually going to financially affect, you know, the lesser well off. How is this financially going to impact you with things like your son's treatment?
Absolutely. I mean, we have to take him to hospital quite regularly, and unfortunately the hospitals he has to go to are inside the expanded and the current ULEZ zones. The current ULEZ zone isn't so bad because we can use public transport, but the expanded ULEZ zone isn't served so well by public transport, so we still have to use the car and we'd still have to pay the charge. And the thing is, we can't afford a new car. We can't afford to pay the charge either, so we're sort of stuck in a bit of a limbo. And paying the £12.50 isn't going to improve the air quality. It's just going to take £12.50 a day out of our pockets that we can't afford. So,
is this an issue you've raised with the Mayor of London?
Yeah, well, because he's got a disability, so he's entitled to a blue badge, which helps in terms of parking. But because he can walk, he's not entitled to higher rate disability. Because he's not entitled to higher rate disability, the fact that he has to take a nebuliser and various other machines in the car with us isn't counted. It doesn't matter. He can walk. He's not entitled to higher rate disability. But carrying his nebuliser and all these other bits and bobs that we have to carry in the car on public transport is just not an option. So we're kind of stuck in the middle, unfortunately.
So have your concerns just been ignored by the office for the Mayor?
Yeah, because computer says, no, sorry mate, you don't qualify for this, so tough, you've got to pay.
So Kingsley, would you mind showing us some of the equipment that your son needs?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. No, good boy. Good boy.
Good lad.
He's a good boy. So, I'm going to turn it off for a second so we can talk. Is that okay? So
this is just some of the equipment you have, which
yeah.
It basically means, you know, public transport, it's not feasible for you. If Teddy needs to be around this at all times,
Yeah.
public transport for you just isn't feasible.
That's right, yeah. And also, it's not just the carrying of the stuff. We need to be able to plug it in at any point. If we need to plug it into the car, we can do so. We can't plug it in on a bus or the train. It's just a nightmare, because if he needs it and he says, I need it now, He doesn't say it, obviously. I mean, he says it in the colour of his skin. His skin might start going dark because he's got low oxygen or whatever. We know that he needs to have his bits and bobs now. We need to have it with us. And public transport is, sorry mate, I'm just going to put this down on your lap. Sorry mate, excuse me while I'm just going to do this while you're sat on the tube. It's not practical.
Yeah.
So.
And obviously, the argument of this one-size-fits-all policy for cleaner air and for people's health, actually it doesn't quite fit, because for his health he needs this, and for this he needs a car.
Absolutely, yeah, of course. And this is the problem. People say to me, "Oh, you must be against clean air. Why are you against clean air?" I was like, "I'm not against clean air at all. I'm against nonsense." And this ULEZ is absolute nonsense. It is exactly as you say. It's just a one-size-fits-all, straight line down the middle. Bad. That side's good. That's it. And we're not having any sort of variations or looking at people's situations. If they could employ someone to say, actually, we're going to make exceptions in certain circumstances, and please write to, and we'll review it, that would be a start. But they don't even have that. So many people, not just us, are stuck in this. We can't comply. We can't afford to comply. But we also can't afford to not have a car. And saying that the poorest of people don't own cars is rubbish, because the poorest of people can't afford to use public transport. But yeah, here we are. We're stuck. So
this was never even in Sadiq Khan's manifesto. But even if you voted for him or not, do you feel let down?
Very much so. And as you say, because it wasn't in the manifesto, it wasn't something we were expecting. I thought, people talked about it might go London-wide. I thought it won't happen because he hasn't mentioned it in his manifesto. And if it was something he was going to do, he would have mentioned it in his manifesto. But then, of course, it's okay, because we've got consultation, and the consultation will be respected. And we all believe and trust in consultation, and of course that's what democracy is about. The consultation went out, and the results were hidden from us. Sadiq Khan said, "I don't want to release the results of the consultation." They were subsequently leaked, and it transpired the reason why they had to be leaked and not published was because the majority of people were against it. And then, of course, figures were tweaked and various other dishonesties going on to try and get the figures down, and they managed to get it down to 60% against it from something like 80% against it. And yes, I absolutely feel let down, because what's the point in democracy? What's the point in consultation if we're just going to be roughshod ignored? And Sadiq Khan says, "Oh, I'm a leader." No, you're not a leader. You're an elected representative. There's a difference. You represent the people that elected you, and nobody elected you to expand the ULEZ to the M25 or to outer London. So yes, absolutely, we feel let down. I feel like we've been blindsided and run roughshod over.
So it was interesting talking to Kingsley then, because one of the things that the ULEZ is being pushed forward for is for people's health, for the benefit of people's health. However, we can see right there, for the sake of his own son's health, he needs his car. So I wanted to speak to an industry expert. So I got in touch with the founder of Fairfuel UK, Howard Cox, who's been opposition to Sadiq Khan for some years now and has lobbied against the ULEZ. Howard, great to meet you. Firstly, why are you so against the ULEZ?
It's very simple. I mean, from a point of view of ULEZ, everyone wants to breathe clean air. It's as simple as that. But this is not going to clean air at all. I mean, the expansion of ULEZ to the M25 will actually cripple businesses, small businesses, especially white van man, the plumbers, the electricians, etc., those sorts of people, and obviously low-income families. And it won't make any measurable difference, and it's been proven, to the air we breathe. And it is a pure cash-grabbing exercise by a man with a massive ego.
So expand a little bit more on this consultation where people's voices were actually ignored.
Yeah, by definition, a public consultation is to ask the public what they think about something. And the idea of a public consultation is give advice on what you do with the decision you get for the result from the public consultation. In this case, the public consultation simply asked, do you agree with the expansion of the ULEZ, existing ULEZ, which only goes to North and South Circular at the moment, to expand all the way to the M25 to take in all the Greater London boroughs. It was overwhelmingly, 2 out of 3 of the people responded said they were against the ULEZ expansion. Now, for some reason, and this is one of the bad things, we learn not only did he ignore the 2 out of 3, but he also ignored the fact that 5,000 Fairfield UK supporters who actually responded right across the country, people who drive into London, businesses, etc. Those opposition to the actual plan of expansion were ignored too. And then we find out that 6 months before the public consultation, he'd already ordered the cameras that around to actually police this expansion process, so he can collect the money and catch people with registration recognition schemes. This is the sort of person we're dealing with. He ignores the public, he ignores democracy, and he's very dishonest. And I've said it many times, it's on record, I think he's a pathological liar.
And finally, do you think these measures, have anything to do with climate change and low emissions, or do you think it's simply about money and control?
Well, absolutely. I'm afraid it is the latter completely. It's about control. That's a terrible thing. It's also about cash grab. The net zero is a fantasy, and on the journey, I alluded to it just now, on the journey to net zero 2050, we're leading the way in actually stopping the sale of new diesel and petrol cars in 2030. That's 6 years' time. It's ridiculous. People can't afford to change their attitude, and the National Grid can't actually fund support 37 million of us changing to electric vehicles either. It's a complete and utter mess. There's no need to do that. What we should be allowing to do is incentivising drivers to move to cleaner fuels. And it's not just one mode of transport, i.e. electric vehicles. There's hydrogen, there's synthetic fuels, there's e-fuels, there's loads of things we can consider. There's even fuel catalysts you can add, which could halve emissions now. But they're not looking at that. All they're doing is telling us in a draconian way and a dictatorial way is saying you can only drive electric vehicles. It's wrong, and it's totally actually unconsulted. No one's asked me or asked you, do you agree with this? I've never seen a consultation approach, and it wasn't in anyone's manifesto either.
So having spoken to a concerned father and an expert, I wanted to see with my own eyes one of these grassroots protests against the ULEZ expansion. So the other day, I hopped on the tube and I went to Mitcham in South London. The locals in Mitcham have taken it upon themselves to stand up against the ULEZ expansion, and on a weekday have come out to line the streets holding protest signs and handing out leaflets to let the community know how they'll be affected by the ULEZ expansion. So Graham, why is the ULEZ issue so important to you?
Safety, really. Safety of the youngsters. I mean, my daughter, she works in Croydon. She starts an early shift, which is sometimes 6:30 in the morning, and I don't want her going through Croydon to get to work on public transport, because it's just not safe. And sometimes she finishes at 9:30 at night, And with all the crime rate and the stabbings, and I mean, up the road there's been a shooting, like a 20-year-old's been shot dead today. I mean, it's just not safe. And it's, all you're hearing on the news is stabbings in London, and it's, every time my kids go out, I get worried, So I prefer if they ring me and I can pick them up, but without my car, I can't pick them up. I can't afford a new car,
So why are you against the ULEZ expansion?
Well, first of all, we've got a cost of living crisis. He has conned us. He has lied through his back teeth and won't own up to it. He is a narcissist. He's a misogynist because he's made no allowances for women who are going to be walking the streets at 4 o'clock in the morning because they can't afford the £12.50 for their little car. Nurse, fire brigade, police, anybody, care workers, you name it. I'm really passionate about, because I'm not thinking solely for myself, but I'm thinking for the next generations like yourselves. I'm thinking you're not going to be free to do anything in the future. I've had my freedom. My dad fought in the war to have my freedom, and yours, he was hoping, but it looks like this one person is trying to take over. He's trying to tell us what we can and can't do, and it's not on.
So how could you briefly explain how the ULEZ is going to affect you?
Well, basically, my car's non-compliant, so it means from August, to August of 20-something or the other, this year, I'm going to have to pay £12.50 a day to drive anywhere in London. And on top of that, if I go into central London, I'll have to pay the congestion charge as well. Now, my view is that the Mayor doesn't have a mandate for this. It wasn't mentioned in his election manifesto, as far as I'm aware. And a consultation was held, public consultation on the ULEZ expansion was held. And first of all, he wouldn't release the results. When he was finally forced to release the results, it showed that of the people that answered the consultation, 70% of those that live in outer London don't want it. 80% of the people that work in outer London, they might come in from Kent or Surrey or whatever, don't want it. And also a report was done for TfL looking at the impact of the ULEZ expansion on air quality. And it used words like minor to insignificant. So at the end of the day, there's no mandate for it. The people that are affected by majority, the people that answer the consultation by majority don't want it. And it's nothing to do with clean air. So it's just a cash grab. It's a simple cash grab.
So briefly tell me about this sign.
Right, well, it's what I would call highway robbery. All his claims about the pollution in the air and 4,000 people dying a year are all negligible. He doesn't give you an accurate explanation for where he gets his facts from. He turns to abuse. He accuses ordinary people like myself. I'm just an ordinary grandmother. He accuses ordinary people like myself who are fighting for our freedom as being far right. He couldn't be more wrong, and I couldn't feel more strongly about this either. It's going to affect thousands and thousands of Londoners. He's supposed to be our mayor. He's supposed to represent us, not destroy us. And there's going to be business that go out. There are going to be sick people at home not being able to go to hospital because their carers won't be able to afford to drive their cars anymore. My son has an autistic child that cannot go on a bus and he needs his livelihood, which is his car. There are so many reasons why this is so wrong, and this man's claims are negligible.
So the anti-ULEZ movement seems to be quite a unifying one here in London. The entire time we've been here, as you can hear, all the passers-by are beeping their horns and shouting out positive words of encouragement to the protesters stood here on the street protesting against the ULEZ expansion. Some people think that they can get around this by getting an electric car, and they think that'll be the end of it. Will it stop there, do you think?
Well, getting an electric car is completely stupid. In terms, their own terms, it's nonsense because they produce more CO2 per mile and they cause death of, young boys in Africa mining the cobalt to make all these batteries. It's not a sustainable activity. It will end with a big crash because they won't have the materials to make all these electric cars, and then you'll be left high and dry without a car. So the electric car idea is a means to remove all vehicles, all cars from the road. That is the Agenda 2030 plan.
Could you briefly tell me how it's going to affect them? Because that's what a lot of people seem to not see. How does it affect me?
I'll tell you how it affects me, all right? My little van's over there, what I drive every day, non-compliant. Come August, if this cretin gets his way, that's it, I can't drive anymore. I'm off the road. My nearest bus stop is, I think it's about half a mile away. You might not have noticed because I'm standing, but I don't walk a lot. I can't walk. I can't even make it to the bus stop, let alone go and do whatever I want to do and get back home again. So basically, I'm stuck indoors, and that applies to so many people. That's nurses, police, emergency crew. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. Old people are going to be stuck indoors with no carers, not be able to get to their hospital appointments. Even if you want to go to an incidental little thing, Chessington World of Adventure. If you look at the map, this is the cynicism of this man. They've actually included that, even though it's outside the M25. So it's just about, at the moment, raising money, but eventually it's to stop people driving. It's to stop, all your freedoms are going to be taken away.
It's hard not to see that the ULEZ is deeply unpopular and will damage the lives of ordinary, hard-working Londoners. It's not just the protests in Mitcham or Kingsley and Croydon, it's everywhere. The Facebook group Kingsley set up to rally against the ULEZ has more than 36,000 members and growing. The group and other online groups are full of people sharing stories about how the ULEZ expansion will be detrimental to their lives. Others post images of broken or damaged ULEZ cameras and people obscuring the view of ULEZ cameras with bags. After spending a few days here in the City of London, it's clear to see there is very little, if any, support for the expansion of the ULEZ. Many people see this as a tax on the least well-off in society, as ultimately they will have to foot the bill. Thousands of businesses will go under and people will be forced into poverty simply for driving on roads they already pay for with their tax money. This has been Callum Smiles for Rebel News here in central London. If you value everything we do here at Rebel News UK and you would rather voluntarily help cover our minimal expenses rather than forcibly pay for another one of Sadiq Khan's failed policies, well, you can do so at ukreporters.co.uk so we can continue to bring you the truth.